Yo, welcome to the Table Talk podcast, where we sit down, pull up a chair, and we get started. This podcast is designed to provide you packed full of information to help you with your training, nutrition, lifestyle, and well-being, where we interview myself through case studies to give you lifetime experience. And then we also interview high-performing individuals or other career-focused people who are looking to make changes in their lifestyle, training, nutrition, and well-being. So let's pull up that chair and let's go. Yo, welcome to Table Talk. Today we have special guest, Andy Campbell, or as I like to put it, Andy Campbell. Why do I do that? Because that is his nickname, or how I say it for him. This is a man who I've known for 6-7 years now, I'd say.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, about that. And he's someone who our first encounter was way back when I started doing a mentoring program called Wolfpack with a man called Mark Tobre. Hello, sir. Alpha Dog. So it was called Alpha. I joined the Alpha program, and Andy had, little green boy. He's new to the program, new to enterprise, and he's in the back on his computer, and he worked for Mark. Obviously, me being me, I trust Mark. Mark trusts him. I can trust Andy. So I walked up to Andy. I go, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm booking flights and organizing accommodation." Now, I wanted to learn from a gentleman called Dr. D. Martini. However, I think at the time he's like, it's $100,000 for an hour of my time. Oh, I can't afford that. And through meeting Andy, I realized that he was actually going to go learn from D. Martini. And he really loves D. Martini, maybe we would say. Loves the material, the philosophy, and really just fully embodies it. And from there, I literally was like, "What are you going to do?" He's like, "Oh, I'm flying to Sydney and I'm going to go do D. Martini for 7 days." So the breakthrough experience. If you haven't done it, check it out. I've done it. He's done it many, many times. You might even do it with Andy himself. And from there, he was looking at accommodation, and I literally was like, "Here are my keys. You can stay in my place for 7 days." He's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, I'm going to be here for 7 days." So he flew to Sydney and stayed in our place for 7 days. And then literally we just became friends. And every time I came to Melbourne, I would stay with him. When he came to Sydney, I would stay with him. He would stay with me. Yeah. Our place became his place. And whenever we finished courses, the two of us, or partner Kate, like our friends in the household, it would, you'd finish an event, say at 6, 7 p.m., we'd have dinner, and usually the two of us and others would just sit there and talking like, "What did you learn? How are you going to apply it? What's your takeaway?" And we would discuss it to the point where it'd be like 2 a.m. and it's like, "I've got to be up in 5 hours, better get some sleep." So really enjoyed having him in his company. And we brought him on today to talk more about him, his philosophy, how he came to be. But also, if you're someone who's stuck in a rut, this is the guy that I use a lot of the time and Kate uses. So here he is, Mr. Andy Campbell. Welcome, sir. Longest introduction.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, well, when I first met Carl, he gave me the keys to his apartment, and I wasn't even in the same city. So that was how we met. Yeah,
that was the first day we met. It was great. We'll get a different engagement intro for you in the next episode. Of course, it'll be quicker. So, cool. Today's episode is literally to focus on health and fitness. So Andy is someone who works on Breakthrough. So we'll talk a bit about what he does as a service. And then we're going to look at how he, being someone who hasn't been a trainer, but he's worked in the health sector. He used to help with the sales, and now he's doing Breakthrough consulting, and now he's training in another space. How does he stay on top of his health and fitness? Is he doing it himself because he's been emerged and surrounded by it, or is he hiring people or just doing it on his own? So, Andy, let's probably start with, who are you and what do you do?
So I'm a breakthrough coach. So who am I? I'm someone that loves to work with people to understand their mind and break through whatever the biggest personal challenge they have going on in their life. So a lot of my work is mental, emotional challenges, but it extends to personal relationships, business. Everything we do through the medium of our mind, essentially. So it's helping people to understand their mind. And when they understand why they're feeling the way they're feeling, or why they're doing a certain behavior, when they understand themselves, then they're back aligned with themselves. And it's about kind of understanding yourself instead of judging yourself. And then when you're in that space, then you're good to go, essentially. So I help people with that connection, exploring that, getting them present, getting them authentic, this kind of thing.
And is that easy, hard, moderate? Like, is it like quick, or is it something that takes time?
Well, it depends on what the person's working on and what their challenge is. But anything that you're going through mentally, emotionally, you can break through it. And some processes can take longer than others. Yeah, it depends on the specifics of what the person comes in for.
Okay. Let's use you as an example then, shall we? So when we first met 6-7 years ago, what was your day-to-day routine? Because you were just getting into the DiMartini area, right? And so now you believe you're running some events in Sydney, in Melbourne. So you're running through programs in Australia?
Yeah, Melbourne and online.
Which is awesome. Focusing on health and fitness for the part one is, what was a typical routine for you for the day versus a typical routine for you now? Because you're focusing a lot more on the mental side. Have you found in the last 6-7 years major changes? You know, for example, I do water in the morning. Now I do lemon water or filtered water. Have you made many changes from the past to the present, or is it quite similar with what you've learned over these years from a physical sense?
Well, from a physical sense, in the morning, the major thing for me is getting some kind of exercise, some kind of movement in the morning. So I like to train as like the first thing in the morning. When I get up, I just have like water with electrolytes, and that kind of works for me, kind of rehydrates me. And then I get straight into some kind of, if I'm training in the gym that morning, then that's the thing. Or if I'm not doing that, then I'll go for a walk and listen to a book, usually something around human behavior, personal development kind of area. So that's how I start the day.
Yeah. And is it like your first 60 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours for you before you do anything like else?
If I'm training, then I'll train for just over an hour, and then come home, have breakfast, and then get into work from there.
Yeah. And what's a typical day look like for you?
Typical day. So usually I'm first thing training in the morning, come home, have breakfast, then I'll get into client calls. So work one-to-one, various different things, but it's all mindset, human behavior, mental, emotional kind of challenges. So one-to-one calls is mostly my day, and then also social media content, and I've got an online course as well. And so building content in the online course, responding to questions, is what a typical day looks like for me.
What was it like when you were starting your studies? So when back in the day of enterprise, what would a typical day look like for you then? So right now you wake up, it's about you, electrolytes, train, and then get into your day of work, content, social media, calls, check-ins, clients. But what did it used to be back then? Were you still waking up in the morning, electrolytes, train first, then you would jump in to enterprise and be doing calls and sales and bookings? Or was it different?
Well, back when we first met, I was at enterprise, and I was doing at that stage, I was doing sales. I was selling personal training packages, and I was also doing the Wolfpack coaching calls. So I was working with some of the guys in that program and doing the one-to-one calls with them. And so the day, I mean, it was a bit differently. Typically, I'd see sales calls in the afternoon, evening. And so I would train maybe mid-morning kind of thing. So in terms of the structure of my day, not hugely different structure to it. I train a little bit earlier in the morning now than I used to. And then obviously
5 a.m.
Say again.
How early? 5, 7, 9?
Not your early. More like I'll train at 8 a.m.
Normal person's early. Okay.
Yeah, normal person's early.
I like sleep.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay, and what are you currently training at the moment?
Strength training.
Or?
Well, at the moment, it's just kind of maintaining where I am. So it's focusing on building a little bit of muscle, but also it's right now it's rehabbing from a finger injury. So it's kind of
yeah. That's that. As you know, those are wondering if you can see his screen. That's from a fight he had in the office in the background. That is not a display background. That is the actual office. And he works in the conference room. Got into a mash-up fight. No, the basketball
in the office.
Yeah. I'm a breakthrough. You will have a breakthrough.
Yeah, almost breakthrough.
Yeah. So yeah, broken finger from basketball. Should see the other guy though.
The other guy was fine, absolutely fine.
What like, because obviously as a breakthrough coach, right? You look at the positives and the negatives. Were you just like, the positive from this is I don't have to hold a dumbbell for a while.
That was like the main thing I was on the negative column was not going to be able to train for ages, but my finger was kind of sticking out at an angle. And initially, it's like this is a negative thing, but then as a breakthrough coach, my job is then to look at, okay, great, how is it serving me? How's it on the way? How's it helping me achieve my goals in life?
Forced variation. You can attach the band here, shorten the lever, get a little more peak in the bicep. Oh, mate, more cable flies, bring that peak in the chest, strengthen the shoulders. Oh, variation at its finest.
Yeah, apparently there's a lot of, I know sometimes I can put like a hook kind of thing. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like you got some tips for me in this area.
I love it. Let's do it. If you're looking for more programs, let's go.
Yeah.
With bringing it back to prior to getting into a street fight, look, I'll make jokes all day, but Andy was obviously very humble, just playing basketball. Now, I don't know how many times I've stubbed my fingers, even in soccer, like the toes, the hands. You're not meant to do that with soccer, but in footy, like you just catch the ball the wrong way and there it goes. It's just one of those things you're like, damn it. But when you said you've got strength training, you've got a coach, you're doing maintenance for strength. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, my main goal up until a week ago was kind of building a little bit more muscle. So I've trained for a while. So as you were saying before, I've trained since enterprise days. I'm not wanting to put on a whole lot of muscle. I'm pretty happy where I am. And so the main focus recently has been increasing my strength. So I was working with my coach the other day, for example, and I obviously noticed the world through the filter of mindset. And so I was doing a bench press and I was lifting a certain amount. And then my coach came in and said, hey, let's do this other amount. And so we then went on to the higher, we added more weight to it. And I was like, oh, I can do this. And so, the focus has been on improving strength. But then 10 days ago now, I broke the finger. And so now it's like focusing on lower body and one-sided like movements.
So you can build muscle.
Okay.
You can still build muscle. Just
lopsided.
Just flex both sides. Just like instead of flexing the fingers, just like, oh.
I can do that instead.
There was a famous powerlifter who literally he couldn't train legs, but all he did was flex. I think Flex Wheeler. It's probably why he was called Flex Wheeler, because all he did was flex his legs as hard as he could, and it led to like growth. He like genetically just bigger legs. Because he couldn't train them, so he's like, well, I'll just flex the muscle because that's a whole isometric hold. So, you could be called Flex Andy.
Is it an alternate career path for me?
Yep. Well, you got to flex the mind. So it does play well. Instead of the method, it can be F method.
Flex method.
Yeah, A method to now F method. AF method, amazing as beep.
Yeah.
It's funny. So you're changing that up a little bit, which is cool. And if we can find some of your photo shoots, boom, boom, boom. Here's Andy in photo shoot prep mode, which is looking good. The question is that kind of the physique you're looking to hold all year round now? Or are you looking to just slowly build on? Because when it comes to photo shoot, you're dialing in, then there's a day, right? But then afterwards, you put a little bit of weight on after. Some people rebound aggressively. Like, here's a picture of me, 3% body fat, people looking, and then that's me at 40%, huge blowout. So obviously you've been much more sensible with yours. Are you looking to kind of get back to that physique, but not so much like I've got to do it now versus I'd like to get there in the future? I'm not too concerned about the timeline because I know I've got time and I'm just going to slowly build on that from month to month.
Well, at the moment, I would estimate somewhere around 10% body fat, I think is where I'm at the moment. But then I'm not wanting to get photo shoot shredded, but just I'm at kind of 10%. I learned a lot over the journey in terms of just things I was doing, like small things here and there that would be blowing out the weight, for example. So I would have, I suppose it's basic stuff to the people listening, but I'd be eating chicken thighs instead of chicken breasts, and I'd be having butter in a meal plan, but I'd put twice the amount of butter. And so for me, a lot of the learning was education around both the macros, but then also using my MyFitnessPal helped me to understand exactly how much butter am I having, and so then
tracking,
understanding those amounts really helped me to, and then just changing a few simple things. And then when I did, I'm now able to maintain around 10%, and it kind of works for me, and I'm happy with that. So I'm not as fluctuating as I was maybe 6-7 years ago.
Nice. So a little more consistent, training 3 times a week, and just more dialed in with your nutrition. Like it.
And then also I find, obviously, my focus is more the mindset components. I find the more that I can work on my mindset and work that in as well, I find the less fluctuation in terms of cravings and wanting to eat shitty foods and whatnot. I find them correlated. The more that I'm emotionally volatile in my mind, the more I'm going to go for those kind of immediate gratifying foods.
What?
I use the mental component to help me as well.
That's witchcraft. No. Let's probably then tie this into then you're saying, well, I say stress messes with everything, but being volatile in the mindset would be, for everyone is really the work-life balance. That's a big one, that it's all about the balance of my life versus work. And from the sounds you were training at 9 or 10 and then doing calls and sales from 12 onwards. So are you sleeping and waking at similar times post and now? Because it sounds like you've really shifted from midday now to mornings around 8. So that's 2 hours earlier. And now you're doing your own work till later in the afternoon. Heck, we're here on a call on Sunday. So how are you managing work-life balance, or how do you look at it?
Work-life balance, I'll train at 8 a.m. in the morning. That's first thing for me in the morning is training. And then I'll bedtime maybe 10, 11 p.m. But for me, it's kind of I try to see them the same as much as I can. So instead of seeing them separate, I try and see them the same. So then it's work and life. So people might say, oh, well, my work is when I'm at work and I'm doing kind of my job, and then my life is maybe my social life or whatever it is. So I try and combine the two in the way that I look at it. So I'll see, for example, my clients and my social life, instead of going out and hanging out for, I don't know, a drink on a Friday, I'll hang out with my clients and then have like interesting conversations, and that's for me more fulfilling than blowing off steam and having a drink kind of thing. So I'll try and combine the two, the work and the life, together as much as I can. If that makes any sense.
So life is work and work is life.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I love doing most is mindset and helping people understand their mind and how it works. And for me, learning about myself, understanding myself. And so for me, the more that I can combine work and life into the one thing, the less I'm stretching myself to try and fit both in. And so for me, it's like it's a mental game as much as a trying to get everything done game.
Yeah. I guess probably to unpack that, I get that, but for a few people, they might be like, huh?
Yeah.
I guess,
Right.
Could you probably describe like yourself and like what you do in a little more detail for people to probably unpack this whole breakthrough coaching? And then we'll go into the part of the daily stressors that people may experience and how to unpack that to decrease the volatility so we can have more control of that balance that you seem to feel the two, like you see the two as the same rather than completely separate. That's causing people to, go out on a bender maybe Friday night.
Yeah, well, for me, so what I do is I call it breakthrough coaching, but essentially it's working with mindset, and it is it's like a journey of understanding yourself and what drives you. And so what is the inspiration that drives me as a human being? So for me, it's understanding the mind, how it works, and then helping teaching others and learning it for myself. And so I see, like, reflecting on like me growing up until now, the best way probably to answer the question, when I was at uni, I remember I was doing a promo job, and I was like at the train station and giving away the new chocolate bar or whatever it was, or the new coffee or whatever. And I was like,
hang on, how do you get those two mixed up? Coffee and chocolate, they're completely different.
Yeah, some kind of chocolate or coffee. I have more
calories
together. But I was doing that, and that was kind of like I was in that job. And when I was doing that, I was hating it. I was wanting to get out of it. I was disassociating. I was thinking about other stuff. And then when I got out of it, I was like, oh, now I've got my life. And then I would just, go and do whatever. And then I go back to the job. And so I had this, I hate my work. I want to escape from it. And then I escape from it. And then I've got to go back to work. And so for me, I kind of came across the breakthrough work that I do now. And when I found that, I was like, this is something I don't want to escape from. I love doing this. If I've got spare time, I'm talking to people about mindset and understanding yourself and this kind of thing. And so for me, when I found that, it was like I was already doing that, but I wasn't realizing it. And so becoming aware that, oh, this is the thing that I love to do. And so for me, probably I don't know if this is a roundabout way of answering the question. When I was at uni, I was in that work-life balance where I hated the work. I was trying to escape from the work going into my life. And then, I got to go back to work. And then when I found the thing I really love doing, it's like, I just want to do this. Yeah, it's work, but it's my life at the same time.
How did you come across I guess, because that would be one of your first achievements of when you started to have your own breakthrough and realization of like that being what you wanted to do. Like, were you working the job in the life, and you were like, oh, there's got to be a better way? Or like, how did you fall into the mindset space and DeMartini and to where you are now? Like, how did you get there?
Well, at the time, I was at uni and I was studying sports journalism because I was
really
sports journalism at Vitruvian in Melbourne. It's kind of bizarre because we probably never talked about it, but I got out of high school.
You've
and I
seen
had no idea what I wanted to do.
You know how I spell, so it's totally understandable. We wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Sports journalism. Yep.
Sports journalism. Because I finished high school and then it was like, I don't know what I want to do now. Because it's like, your whole life, you get told, oh, now you go to year 11, now you go to year 12. And it's like, oh, now what do you want to do? So I was like, everyone was telling me to go to uni. I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, I kind of like watching the footy on the weekend, so I'll do sports journalism. I'll write about, the footy. But how I got into this was I went to a seminar one day. It was a 2-day seminar. It's called the Breakthrough Experience that you've mentioned, Carl. Second day of the Breakthrough Experience, the speaker, Dr. DiMartini, who you mentioned before, he's up the front of the room and he asked
He's
the
at
room,
the uni.
Hey?
Is he at the uni giving a lecture?
No, he was at a 2-day seminar. This was in Auckland, New Zealand.
Okay, but so because you've gone from Melbourne Uni to then go to Auckland. So you've gone to Auckland?
Yeah, well, at the time I was studying at uni,
yep.
I actually found out about it through Mark Tobre, who you mentioned from Enterprise. And I was at like his training and nutrition seminar, and someone asked, who's your mentor in nutrition and training and mindset? He said 30 seconds on DiMartini and mindset. And in that 30 seconds, it was like something in me was like, I got to go and find this DiMartini bloke.
Yeah.
And I went home that day from that seminar and I looked it up online, and he was doing a course in Brisbane and one in Auckland, and Auckland was half the price of Brisbane. So I booked a ticket there, I flew there, and I went and did the course.
That's great. J-Bar, I'm going.
Yeah. And I got to go to New Zealand. So that was cool.
So a side thing is, for those who are curious, Andy has this thing that I love, which is, I think we both picked it up from DiMartini, is, if you ask yourself, how can I get it for free? Like there's always a way. So it could be you give someone your time. And I remember learning about this car company which I did. I wanted to travel like halfway around Australia and do Adelaide, Melbourne and whatnot. And so you can actually hire a van, but you actually are transporting the van. So all you have to do is pay for petrol. So yeah, learning that from Andy. So that's great that, this one's half the price. Off I go.
Yeah, ask yourself the question, because it's like the default is, I want to travel somewhere. How much does it cost to get there? But instead you're asking, how can I get paid to do it? Or how can I do it for free? And then, there's van relocation. You can take a van and you can relocate it for free.
Paying for it. Yeah. Right. So, okay, so you've gone to Auckland. You've done your first day, and then on the second day, DiMartini said, or did.
Well, the second day, DiMartini was asking the group. So it's in like a hotel seminar room, and there's probably 60, 70 people that are in there. And so he asked the audience, is anybody grieving right now? And there was one particular lady, she was like mid to late 20s, and she put her hand up and she said, well, I broke up with my boyfriend. He said, will you get back with me? I said, no, it's over. He then called me and said, if you don't get back with me, I'm going to commit suicide. And she said to him, I'm not going to get back with you. It's done. And so this girl told the room that she came home that evening and the bloke had committed suicide in her apartment. So I was in the audience and I was sitting there and I was like, well, he's probably never going to get over the grief of this, and she's probably never going to get over the guilt of it because she thinks that it's her fault that he's done it. And so anyway, DiMartini says, come up to the front, gives her a microphone and takes her through a series of specific questions. And I'm kind of looking at that and I'm like, okay, I wonder what this is about. And so then what he's doing is he's taking her perception in her mind, and he's going, and for grief, he's going in asking specific questions to balance the content in her mind, to dissolve the grief and to dissolve the guilt. So in 3 hours, at the end of the process, this girl turns to the room and she can no longer access the guilt. She can no longer access the grief. She's completely processed it. And I'm sitting there at the time and I'm like, well, I thought this was something that you go through therapy for, and only time heals, and all these kind of things that I had bought into without even realizing it, which is my default paradigm of the world. And then in this moment, I'm like, you can break through all of this in a matter of hours just by knowing how to ask yourself the right questions and change your brain.
Well, she did heal over time.
Well, she healed over time, but with grief, you will heal grief over time, but it's only because you can do it right now in the moment by asking the right questions to find the content, or you can eventually do it over time by finding the answers over time, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
So you thought it would take a lot longer versus 3 hours, and you were just like,
yeah, it blew my mind, man. I was sitting there and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to teach this information to as many people as possible. I want to help people to understand that you can break through whatever it is that you're going through in hours, and it doesn't need to be the paradigm of, you know, you have to go through whatever it is for a lifetime, or you don't have to go to therapy for decades. You go to a few sessions, you break through it, you move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Knowing that you've had an experience through asking them better questions and being able to dive a little deeper, is there certain questions, I guess, from what we've already gone through a little bit about yourself, routine and structure and life balance, do you feel there are better questions to be asking to understand Andy Campbell more? And what would those questions be?
Well, essentially, what I do is just helping people to understand, as I was saying.
Hang on. What would be the question? What would be the question? I guess, you know, what would be the question to ask you to help you unlock more of the information that we want to get to? Because, you know, if we go through, we've got like the question of how do you look at work-life balance? And you'd say, I see them as the same. You know, that to someone would be a base level answer. But how could you get someone to divulge more information with your knowledge of being like, because it sounds like you don't just work with the mind and the breakthrough of the person. You actually work with someone and asking questions upon questions that help guide that person to where they need to have that breakthrough. As a second milestone, have you found that there are specific questions or better level questions that people could be asking to have deeper and more meaningful conversations with others? For example, like you and I, like through this podcast right now. What questions are there?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, it's all a mind game, right? It's all about the question that you ask. So if you ask the question, kind of like we talked about with the paying for things versus how can I get paid to do it?
Yeah,
but it's like you're asking the question from the perspective that you want to see it from.
So, like, how much is it going to cost me to fly to America? Which is what most people are asked and most people are conditioned, versus in the moment when you ask that question, how can you look at it differently?
Yeah, because when you ask that question, the assumption is for me to get to where I want to go, it's going to cost me. And so then we ask that question. But then, and it's like anything, right? So something happens and it's like, oh, this is a terrible situation. Instead of saying, oh, gee, how do I keep ending up in terrible situations? The assumption is it's a terrible situation. So you got to take all the assumptions out, and then you got to ask the question from a point of where do I want to get to? So then it's like, how is this situation I think is terrible right now actually helping me achieve what I want to achieve in life?
I want to move forward. Yes.
Has it helped me get to the next step or whatever it is? So yeah, it's like, I think I'm answering the question. It's like taking out the assumption and then, but the hardest thing is realizing what are my assumptions about the situation.
So it's not so much there's a better question. It's more when you ask a question to ask yourself, is there another way to look at it? And then ask the question to that. So how much is it going to cost me to travel versus, I'm assuming that I have to pay to travel versus how can I travel for free, which is a different way of looking at it. And then therefore leads to a different question. At the end of the day, the traveling from A to B is what's going to happen, but asking yourself a different question or questions of how to get there. Get paid with a friend, travel, which halves the cost, get paid to do it, journal about it, do it, like document the whole thing, get someone to pay you to travel so you can document it all, like a lot of social influencers do. So finding different ways to go about it. At the end of the day, you're still going from A to B, but the way in which you talk about it and question it is different. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. It's like your mind's going to find the answer to whatever you ask it. So if you ask it, how can I pay for it? It'll find how to pay for it. But if you ask it a different question, it's going to find a different, like all those things that you mentioned about traveling with a friend or doing the blogging, all of those things wouldn't even come into your mind unless you ask the question, how can I do it? How can I get paid to do it? Or how can I do it for free?
All right. Well, here's another question then, which is, well, then let's test this. So for example, What is your nighttime routine?
Nighttime routine at the moment, basically, it's not like a whole lengthy thing. It's more, I like to be reading some.
Andy, at nighttime, what do you do to maximize cognitive performance so you can be better tomorrow?
Some good quality book before I go to bed, or listening to something that's kind of stretching me or making me think.
Okay. Then you go to sleep.
Then when I'm going to sleep, I'm thinking about, this new topic or the thing that I haven't considered, and so then I'm thinking about that as I go to sleep.
Do you still have a whiteboard in your room to put those thoughts down?
I do it on my Remarkable tablet at the moment.
What do you think of the Remarkable?
Yeah, it's cool.
Does it feel like paper, but not really paper?
Yeah, like as close as you can get to. It's very different to like an iPad, like glass screen.
Yeah. So it's not a glass screen?
No, it's like I suppose it feels like paper to some degree. I just use it for all my client notes and stuff.
Oh. Are you thinking of upgrading to the Remarkable 2.0? It's 100% better than the original because it's 2.0.
I suppose. I mean, mine does everything that it needs to do, so I'm like, does the job.
2.0 could do more. It's more paper-like. Okay, so it's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the thing I like about it is you store all your client notes in it, and you can't go onto social media or anything on it, so you can't distract yourself. It's just a place where you can do your work and have the internet connected. And
okay, well, let's quickly rewind. Let's try the question a different way. Andy, at nighttime, what do you do to maximize cognitive performance so you can be better tomorrow?
I like to read something interesting before I'm going to bed.
Yep.
Something I can think about as I go to sleep, I suppose. But it's like whatever you're thinking about as you go to sleep is going to then
manifest.
Yeah, well, you're thinking about it in the background. So it's like I try to use that time to, I don't know, think about things in the background.
All right. Take 3. Andy, what do you do at nighttime to get the deepest possible sleep to maximize recovery for training performance?
Read a book. That's about it.
Cool. So reading a book does tick a few boxes for a few things. Is there any supplements you take to enhance the book reading experience?
At the moment, the only supplements I'm taking is electrolytes. And then also I was taking a beef liver supplement. I think it's beef liver. Just trying that out for energy and whatnot. But
found it helpful?
A little bit. I haven't noticed huge effects from it.
Okay. And Andy, what are your top 3 books to help you with sleep? Because there are nights probably where you toss and turn, or you've got a lot on your mind, through those book readings. So do you have 3 top books that you tend to read more frequently to go to sleep?
In terms of books that put me to sleep?
Yep. Or I guess, have you ever read the same book several times?
My favorite book is The Breakthrough Experience by John DeMartini. So that book's all about the philosophy of whatever's going on, seeing both sides to it. Because for me, it's like if you're wanting to get to sleep, the thing that's going to keep you awake is going to be your stress. And so if you're thinking about something that you're seeing as a massive negative, that's going to keep you awake because you're going to be stressing about it. If you're thinking about some massive positive, exciting opportunity, that's going to keep you awake because you're obsessing about that. And so then if you're balancing your perception and you're not caught up in either side of that emotional extreme, then you're going to get the best quality sleep.
So everyone should read The Breakthrough Experience, in your opinion?
That's a book I've read maybe 5 or 6 times, I think.
That's not a small book.
A lot of wisdom in that book.
Love it. He doesn't shower. He does not bathe. He does not brush his teeth. He does not supplement. All he does is read the book. Nice.
Yep.
Last one would be, what motivates you to do what you do? To get up, train, listen to audibles, do consultations, calls, build content, and then also finish the day reading.
For me, it's like, it comes back to that kind of mission and purpose for me. So I see motivation and then I see inspiration. So there's external motivators, which you're trying to avoid a pain or you're trying to seek a pleasure. And then there's an internal inspiration, which for me is the thing that you've got ambition around, where even if it's hard, you keep going with it. And so for me, my thing is mindset, helping people understand themselves, helping people to break through things. So I know when I'm doing that thing, and it's going to be different for everyone, but when I'm doing that thing, that's the most important thing I could be doing. So that's inspiring for me. So when I do that, I don't need any motivation to do it, because it's kind of like that thing. It's like, even if it's a day off and someone's got a challenge in their mind they're struggling with, and they come and have a chat about it, it's like, hey, let's work through this kind of thing. So it's inspiring rather than work that I have to motivate myself to do.
So you're inspired by what you do, so you don't need motivation because you just love what you do.
Yeah, I think everyone's inspired by something, and it's more the degree that we become aware of what it is, because we're doing it automatically. I think everyone's got something they do automatically, and they may or may not recognize it, and they just do it. And then I'm lucky enough to become aware of what it was for me, and then go and make a business out of it. But I think if you find that thing, because everyone's got a value that's most important, and values are finite. There's only one thing in the world that can be most important to any one person. You can't have anything higher than what's most important, right? So that value for me, understanding what that is around the mindset, if I'm doing that, there's nothing more important than I can be doing with that time.
Yeah.
And so if I'm doing that, then I don't need to be motivated, because I'm already doing the most important thing.
Ooh. That's Andy Campbell, a little bit about what he does, his routines and his habits. Training, a little bit of a mess at the moment because of his injured hands, though he will come back with a vengeance. He's just going to change the variation. Doesn't really need to be motivated and doesn't really need a work-life balance, because he's inspired by what he does and really sees how they intertwine with one another. And if sometimes you don't get the answer you want, ask the question differently. Sometimes you'll ask the same question several different ways and you get the same answer, like Andy's nighttime routine: read a book, go to sleep, or use his Remarkable to make notes. And he won't be getting the 2.0 edition because the 1.0 is doing the job. So that's the end of this episode. Stay tuned for the next one, because we're going to dive deeper into a bit about my story and how I met with Andy, and kind of why we've got Andy on the show to help more people out there. Till next time, adios, amigos, and thank you, Andy. Have a great day.